can you kind of foresee America's future in UK? Given that they've gone through similar crises and then evolutions economically.
Yeah, I think it's very hard because the UK gave up its empire and passed the flame to the United States. And the United States had very strong cultural links, economic links, and institutional links with the UK. I mean, we gave birth to America, so the legal system, it's predominantly sort of Protestant outlook, is British, mostly English. Well, you know, so the United States grew its industrial empire pre-war based on protections afforded to it by the Royal Navy, right, the British Navy. So it was able to, you know, trade on the open seas because it was effectively, those trade routes were protected by the Royal Navy.
This is before which war?
Well, this goes back to from the 17th century onwards. And so when the British Empire collapsed and the American Navy were the ones protecting the sea lanes, world trade is protected because of basically the US Navy, with various other navies sort of playing a bit part, but under a framework from the United States.
Yes.
Well, the next stage of handover is, well, potentially to China, with which it shares nothing, no cultural, almost no cultural
Nothing,
ties.
no, yeah.
Very tenuous capital ties, no institutional links, you know, so on and so forth. So even though it was difficult and humiliating for the British Empire to hand over to America, which should have been part of the British Empire, but we'll go into George III later, perhaps never. I mean, we were fighting the French, so we lost America, but that's just the way it was.
Stingy.
It still stings today. But that handover to China is, well, first of all, it's not going to be a handover. They've got to fight for it.
Yeah.
US didn't really have to fight for it. It just it inherited that position. And that's where we are today. Is the US is trying to contain China, and China isn't going to be contained. And so it's not going to be how the West won the Cold War, you know, which it collapsed in a bloodless sort of fizzle out at the end.
Right.
I think one of the things that's really holding a kind of a bayonet in the neck of the Chinese is the history of the collapse of the Soviet Union. They're not going to allow a Gorbachev to appear in China. They're not going to allow somebody just to sort of switch the lights off and say, okay, well, we capitulate. You know, so that's kind of where we are.
And Xi was quite explicit about it too, right? Yeah, of his policy, he's biting the bullet on that one.
On trade, do you mean?
No, on not repeating the same mistake that Soviet Union did.
I think that haunts that issue. That collapse of the Soviet Union haunts the corridors of the CCCP.
Yeah.
Now seeing Xi on the podium with Putin this week, commemorating the Great Patriotic War,
right.
That's quite a spectacle. I mean, to see him there.
You wanna? I know you sent a message to me, right? And then we talked about it over chat. You want to kind of? What's your take on that?
The politics between China and Russia's, I think, it's colourful. I mean, there's an enormous power dynamic. China has all the significant power. I mean, far more than Russia. But the messages to the West. I mean, the fact that he's in Russia right now. Before, is it Besant and the is it Li Qiang?
Li Qiang.
The trade minister from. Anyway, the Scott Bessent and his equivalent in China.
Counterpart,
His counterpart. They're going to meet this week, but they're going to meet with the backdrop of Xi being in Moscow, you know, at the right-hand side of Putin. But look, China doesn't really need Russia for much. I mean, okay, it's getting cheap exports of oil and various other things, and but I mean, Russia's kind of on its knees. It's on one knee militarily, and its economy is suffering. But I mean, what China wants to be able to do is to transit through Central Asia to gain access to the European markets. So it wants a kind of docile, compliant Russia. But Putin can do something really stupid in Ukraine, and is quite capable of it. And that would really screw the relationship between Moscow and Washington, because they would hold Xi responsible.
Okay.
Because he's the one that's providing the logistical support and other types of support.
What about the likelihood of that, of Putin doing something stupid and then...
Well, I think it's incredibly high. Because,
really?
Yes, because the stabilizing force in the world has packed up and gone home.
They're going to sign the deal, right? Or they've already signed the deal with Ukraine, with the...
Who?
America.
Yeah, well, yes, but what is it? It's a mining for weapons deal.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I don't see how that brings peace to Ukraine. All that does is actually embroil the US
back into
Ukraine, which is what the Europeans want. They want to go back into their security blanket.
Yeah.
But I don't think that there's any way out for Putin. I mean, Ukraine isn't going to accept large parts of its territory being annexed by Russia, even though it is de facto the case. And Putin isn't going to stop there.
Right.
Putin's got no reason to stop.
Right.
So could he do something really stupid? Well, yes, because his back is up against the wall. He keeps rattling the nuclear saber, which might just be, I mean, it is ridiculous, but who knows? And I say the stabilising, grown up in the room has well, there isn't one.
No.
Now you've got this petulant idiot that could do anything. So anything could happen. I mean, now you've got Pakistan and India.
I know, yes.
Which is another proxy war.
Right.
Between China and the West.
In the West, yes.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned also, and we saw in the news, right, the J-10 being shut down. Right? J-10 shut down a fleet.
The J-10s have proved themselves to be very effective. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole kind of sort of Milky Way selection, a sort of chocolate box selection of weapon systems. The Indians have got the AS400 or A400 Russian missile system, which is extremely effective. And Pakistanis have got the J-10s. I don't think they've got the J-20s, but they've got the J-10s. And they shot down 3 Rafale fighters from the French. And their share price shot up 40%.
Yeah.
It's
a watershed.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the DeepSeek moment a few months back, right? It's a watershed.
Yeah, it kind of is. It's kind of, well, we're not just some knockoff economy that can build something that looks like, an F-16. We can build something that's better than an F-16 or an F-35.
It's scary. It's gonna rewrite a lot of things in history.
I mean, actually, comparing it to DeepSeek, that's a really interesting insight. I mean, it really is. It's a wake-up moment that you've got to take the Chinese seriously. They're not just low-cost manufacturing hub.
Yeah.
I mean, these guys are making big strides. Strategically. And trade, is only one part of power.
Right. Might is right.
Yes, absolutely. Very interesting.